Answer number 7. The Bear. Impression of Smirnov. The play The Bear was written by the prolific Russian playwright and poet Anton Chekhov in the 19th century. This play revolves around one of the main character in the play, Smirnov, who is the representative of the old feudal society in Russia and conveys many negative and positive qualities of him by the conflict between another main character, Popov. Let's examine about this idea in detail in the following paragraphs. Firstly, the character Smirnov has been introduced to the readers as a middle-aged landowner, and also he has been an unrefined and rude man throughout the play. His mannerism can be highlighted in many aspects of the play. At the beginning, he enters Popova's house without any permission, even though he tries to introduce himself respectfully. His real attitude comes out later on. Furthermore, he insults Popova by insulting the whole female society. This misogynistic attribute of Smirnov indicates that he is a male chauvinist. Also, he generalizes all women and considers them are bad only by his life experiences. The dictions insincere, crooked, backbiters, envious, liars to the marrow of their bones, vain, trivial, merciless, unreasonable, uttered by Smirnov, indicates his poisonous and worse thoughts about women. With that, he also disrespects the servant Luca, who is comparatively older than him. This can be seen in the utterances, "You fool, shut up, I'll chop into pieces." Moreover, the use of animal imagery can be seen throughout the plot. This technique has been mostly employed at Smyrna. Boar, coarse bear, bourbon, monster are the examples for the animal imagery which refers to Smyrna. On the other hand, we can spot a positive attitude of Smirnov in his flashback. He has a good attribute of giving money to the people when they are in trouble. He also names some people whom he had given the money. Gustav Yarosevich, Masugo, Christine are some examples. Also, he is a very short-tempered person who gets angry quickly. That angriness has been the key for many of the problems that he had faced in his lifetime. His extreme angriness can be found from him quivering and struggling to breathe while talking to Popova. Moreover, the manipulative nature of Smirnov can be indicated throughout the plot. He manipulates and controls every situation with his boorish and arrogant behavior. He tactically brings out the defensive and bold side of Popova out, out from her fake life. On the other hand, he uses the gender partiality to manipulate every situation by downgrading the woman. He has been the symbol of male patriarchy in aristocratic class in the old Russia. As a whole, we can conclude that the characters Mono have mostly been a rude and male chauvinist person who has affected by the feminine logics. Even though he is rude, he has a soft corner in his heart which yearns for love, as the end of the play is so dramatic and contradictory. Answer number 8. Vendor of Sweets. Relationship between Jagan and Kasim. The novel Vendor of Sweets was written by the famous Indian writer R.K. Narayan, and this novel portrays about the main character Jagan and his son Mali and his cousin who were living in the town of Malgudi. R.K. Narayan used his fictional town named Malgudi in many of his writings, and let's analyze in more detail in the following paragraphs. The whole story is revolving around the two significant characters, Jagan and Kasit. Jagan is a man who runs a leading sweet vendor in Malgudi, and he's the protagonist of the plot. Like Jagan, the cousin also appears at the beginning and stays till the end. Cousin is a person who's ready to help everyone in the city. The cousin stands as a mediator between Jagan and Malay and a kind advisor to Jagan. The conflict has started and had grown further after Jagan's wife and Malay's uh, mother Ambika's death. Because of that great loss, Mali started to feel more lonely, and the healthy communication between him and the father Jagan had broken up. Knowing the problem between them, Cousin is friendly with Mali to know everything from him to fulfill the longing of Jagan to know about Mali. Cousin has been a communicative bridge between them. For example, he informs Jagan that how Mali hates burning books at the Ananda Bhavan restaurant, and and he further informs that Mali wanted to be a writer. And when Jagan is caught at any critical situation, Cousin is the only one to give him a good advice and to console him. Jagan finds very much emotional comfort from the cousin. This quote shows the strength and the depth of the relationship between Jagan and cousin. Jagan always seeks cousin's consultation and he is welcomed at any time to Jagan's shop and he acts as a quality checker in the shop. Cousin visits Jagan's sweet shop regularly and directly goes to the kitchen without any hesitation to taste one or two sweets as a habit. This shows that how close Jagan and Cousin are in the plot. Jagan doesn't allow others or unfamiliar person to go into the kitchen, but he lets Cousin in. This shows that Cousin is a good companion to Jagan. Throughout the whole novel, the role of Cousin and Jagan has been an important factor. Even though Cousin isn't blood related with Jagan, their relationship is inseparable and very strong. Answer number 9, to the Nile. Similarities of the river Nile with other rivers. To the Nile, to the Nile is a Petrarchan style sonnet which was written by the famous English poet John Keats. Here the poet is discussing the beauty and the service of the main symbol of the poem, which is the Nile River. Let's analyze in more detail in the following paragraphs. Son of the old moon mountains, African, chief of the pyramid and crocodile. In these lines, we can see that the Nile River is associated with the history of building pyramids. With the history of building with the history of building pyramids. People in the ancient times built pyramids as the tombs of their kings or queens. To build the pyramids, people transported large blocks through the Nile River. Like this, every river every river is associated with their own history, and the poet has used personification to personify the Nile as the son of the old moon mountain. This glorifies the Nile River like a king. A desert fills our seeing's inward span, nurse of the swart nations since the world began. Here the poet seems to be doubted about the Nile's fruitfulness, and he says that our imaginations are only about the fruitfulness of the Nile River, not about the deserts which the Nile River flows through. But by Comparing the barrenness and fruitfulness, the poet reveals the wonders of nature. The Nile River has been nourishing the dark complexioned people who are referred as SWAT nations from the very early times. It gives food, a way to transport things, and it keeps the surroundings very prosperous. Like every river, Nile is giving all to the people in need. Green rushes like our river, and those taste the pleasant sunrise, green ices host thought to, and to the sea as happily dost host. These lines comes after the Volta, which is the turning point. Then the legendary history of Nile River and is associated with the mythical gods. The poet is starting to see the Nile River from the imaginative view to the realistic view. These lines are the blend of visual imagery of the river. Pleasant sunrise creates a gorgeous view about the river. The repetition of the word green brings the verdant effect. From all of these, we can consider that the poet is discussing about the similarities between the Nile and the other river. This poem is a depiction of a scenic beauty of the nature. Answer number 10. Once upon a time, pretense and hypocrisy. The poem Once Upon a Time, which was written by the Nigerian poet Gabriel Okara, reflects his own sentiments about the change of the colonialism. The poem highlights how this simple and sincere tribal society is caught between the jaws of germinating Western norms and became insincere and forced to survive in a more sophisticated society. Let's analyze them in more detail in the following paragraphs. The poem has a fairy tale like beginning. The tone of nostalgia and irony is clearly emphasized at the beginning. The, the characteristics of the old people and the new people are compared and contrasted throughout the poem. They used to laugh with their hearts and laugh with their eyes, but now they only laugh with their teeth. In these lines, the poet ironically utilizes the repeated diction laugh to contrast the enormous dissimilarity in expressing emotions like laughing after colonialism. One of the main techniques used here is enjambment. It keeps the readers captivated until the end. The diction ice block cold ice metaphorically shows the uncharitable manner of the colonialized society. It is a depiction of hypocrisy. There was a time, indeed, they used to shake hands with their hearts, but that's gone son. Here, the poet reminds the old times, where people showed fulfillment in everything. Shaking hands with their hearts is the depiction of purity in the old people's heart, and shaking hands without hearts is the pretense of the colonialized people. Searching empty pockets and searching behind the shadow vividly portrays that the people living nowadays only focus on searching about the wealth and the status of other people. The phrases feel at home, come again shows that the colonialized people are mimicking the greeting styles and words of the old people, but they lack in real emotions and feelings. Old people used greeting words to greet a person truly, but people living in nowadays do it just for a formality. The speaker mentions that he has learned to wear many faces like dresses. The, this shows that the speaker is also changing him according to the post-colonial society. I am sure that he doesn't like to be a hypocritic person, but he has to move with the time. Home face, office face are metaphors here, which are the faking portraits that speaker learned to wear. The poet uses a simile to compare the fake smile and the snake's bare fangs. As the conclusion, we can state that the poem Once Upon a Time discusses and portrays about the hypocritic manners and the behaviors of the colonialized people. Answer number 11. I know why the caged bird sings. Need for freedom. The autobiographical poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was written by the American poet Maya Angelou. Discusses about her early experiences of the poet during the repression of the American and African race. With that, the ways to overcome the traumatizing experience which was created by the racism from the white people are expressed here. Let's get a better understanding by analyzing it more. The poetess uses the free bird and caged bird as symbols to emphasize the differences of experiencing freedom with white and black people. It is mentioned that the free bird feels its whole presence in the sunlight and it has the courage to take the ownership of the sky. At the same time, it is also mentioned that the caged bird stalks itself from the sunlight and it is unable to show its expressions. From this, we can differentiate the freedom given to the whites and blacks. The singing of the caged bird symbolically emphasizes the longing for freedom. The restricted emotions of the black people are shown by the comparison. In this poem, it is mentioned that the caged bird is standing on a grave of dreams, and it is obvious that the wishes and dreams of caged bird are buried in the cruel cage. It is no exception for the black people who suffered the xenophobia from the whites. With that, we can see that the caged bird's shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. It means that the black people were seen to tolerate all the injustice from the outside, but from the inside they screamed from agony. The free bird thinks of another breeze, while the caged bird didn't feel one. The breeze is the diction breeze is a freedom. The whites have obtained their freedom, but they want to control and rule the blacks under their control. And the blacks didn't feel the freedom even a single time in those days. As a conclusion, we can see that this poem is a burst of emotions, and as a victim of the racism, Maya Angelou clearly portrays the lack of freedom and the agony done by the whites to the blacks. Answer number 12. War is kind. Justification of the title. The poem War is Kind was written by the famous American war reporter Stephen Crane on the effect of American Civil War in 1899. The title is paradoxical since the reality of war has been brutal rage, loss, and senselessness. Let's examine how this idea is presented in the poem. Is war kind? Definitely the answer is no. When war appears to be brutal, it can never be kind to any parties who have been involved in it. This idea is presented in the first, third, and the last stanzas by using the technique repetition, irony, and metaphor in it. The poet has employed repetition in the phrase war is kind, and that repetition paves the way to illustrate the main idea through the next technique, which is irony. Moreover, in this line, a field where 1,000 corpses lie The poet has used metaphor to emphasize the fatality and the brutality of the war. And indeed, the affected party here are the soldiers. The sympathetic tone of the writer creates sorrow and sympathy amongst the readers. Further, the poem demonstrates the fall of humanity and the futility of the war as sub-themes which have been the results of this cruel act. Moreover, the writer brings out direct and indirect war victims, direct and indirect war victims in order to emphasize the unkindness of the war. Maiden, mother, babe can be taken as the indirect victims, while lover, father, son can be taken as the direct war victims. Also, the poet's description to their death creates more horror. For example, yellow trenches, wild hands, bright shroud are some specific choice of dictions which emphasizes their pathetic death. With that, a broken state of mind, the mind of the innocent war victims indicate the afterward effect of the senseless war. Also, the poet has also used the poetic devices like simile in the line, Mother whose heart hung humble as a button, to support the title which emphasizes the unkindness of the war paradoxically. Answer number 13. Father and son. Father's lack of understanding. The song Father and Son was composed and performed by the British singer and songwriter Cat Stevens in 1970. This poem points out the conflict between two ideologies and two different characteristics, which leads the son to break away from the conservative lifestyle. And let's analyze it more detail in the following paragraphs. Throughout the whole poem, the father continues to repeat the same typical parental advice as he considers his son as immature small boy. It seems that the father worries about his son because he doesn't want his son to choose the hard path of his life. You are still young, that's your fault. Here in these lines, the father indicates the immaturity of the son, and it is ironic that the diction fault doesn't mean that immaturity is a weakness of the son. Moreover, the father is repeatedly emphasizing his life experiences, and the conservative life protocols like finding a girl, marrying, settling down, and etc. To convince and change his son's life path into an orthodox manner. While father is considering his advices as correct ones, the son is fed up with the repetitive old advices as he considered the advices as a restriction for his revolutionary desires. And the poet employs juxtaposition to contrast the radical thoughts and the desires of the son with the anxiety of the father about his son's needs. For you will still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not. In this line, it is obvious that the father hasn't even got a tiny amount of hope in his son's dreams, and he is pretty sure that they will burst and shatter into pieces. But son is very much opposite to his father. He is trusting his dreams fully, and he is sure enough to refuse the conservative life path. We can correlate this poem to the prose Lumber Room written by Sahi because the protagonist of the prose, Nicholas, is also restricted by his art. The common aspects between these two is the restriction of ideologies. The children can't always be contemplated as passive listeners. Parents and caretakers should permit them to convey their ideas and thoughts. Moreover, father's love towards his son hides the potential abilities of the son. On the other hand, the conflict between a father and a son can be taken as a conflict between tradition and modernity. As the son wants to break away from the traditional lifestyle, holding out against the father who follows the traditional lifestyle. As a whole, we can conclude that the poem Father and Son comprehensively illustrates the desire of the son to break away and the lack of understanding of the father. So that's it.